I woke up earlier than usual, not because of the alarm, because of the light. It slipped through the blinds, cold and pale, landing right across my face like some quiet reminder that today wasn't going to feel like yesterday. I got up, made coffee, watched the steam curl into the air until it disappeared. The smell was bitter and familiar, the kind of smell that feels both comforting and lonely at the same time. My laptop was still open on the desk, a spreadsheet frozen mid. I work in consulting, numbers, deadlines, meetings, polite emails. Everything in my life can be measured in hours, dollars, or deliverables. Everything except me. I sat down, stared at the mug in my hands, and realized I hadn't actually woken up in a long time. My body moved, my brain worked, but nothing inside me felt present. Every day had become a loop. Wake up, rush to work, fake small talk, come home, eat something quick, scroll until my eyes hurt, fall asleep, repeat. I thought that was what being a responsible adult meant. Staying busy, staying productive, staying tired. I wasn't living. I was just running from the silence. That morning, for the first time in months, I didn't touch my phone. No emails, no notifications, no endless feed telling me what to want. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't comfort you, but corners you. I took a sip of coffee, it burned my tongue, and, for a second, it felt honest. I looked around my apartment, a half-empty water glass, the stack of unopened mail, the dying plant by the window. None of it was tragic, but together they painted the truth I'd been surviving on autopilot. There's a difference between being alive and feeling alive, and I hadn't crossed that line in a while. A coworker asked me once, half joking, "You ever feel like you're living, but not really living?" I laughed it off, but the question stuck, like something small lodged under your skin that you can't quite ignore. That morning, sitting in that quiet room, I finally understood what he meant. I opened the window. Cold air rushed in, carrying that damp Seattle smell, a mix of rain, metal, and morning. I closed my eyes and breathed. For the first time in forever, I didn't feel the need to rush anywhere. I wasn't late for anything. I wasn't chasing anyone's approval. I was just there, existing. People think slowing down means losing. I used to believe that too. I thought if I stopped moving, the world would leave me behind. But that morning, stillness didn't feel like failure. It felt like truth. There was no epiphany, no movie moment, no sudden spark. Just me, a cup of coffee cooling beside me, and the quiet hum of a city waking up outside. Buses groaning, doors slamming, heels hitting wet pavement. And for once, I wasn't part of the noise. I sat there until the coffee went cold. The light through the window softened from grey to a faint blue. I could feel something shift, not around me, but inside me. Not joy, not sadness. Just awareness. That morning, I didn't decide to change my life. I didn't make a plan or set goals or write affirmations. I just stopped running, and in that small, silent moment, for the first time in years, I felt real. My name's Jake. I'm 30. I live in Seattle. I work as a business consultant, the kind of job people describe as stable or impressive, when they don't actually know what you do. On paper, I've got it together. Decent income, a nice apartment, a small circle of friends, parents who still brag about me at family dinners. From the outside, it probably looks like I'm doing fine, but inside, it's been quiet. Too quiet. Not the kind of quiet that brings peace, The kind that makes you realize there's nothing left to say. That morning, after I sat there watching my coffee go cold, I grabbed my coat and left the apartment. Instead of driving like I always did, I decided to walk to work. Seattle mornings are grey and wet, the kind of weather that seeps into your jacket and slows you down. I didn't rush. I didn't even check the time. I just walked. The air smelled like rain and asphalt, and for once, I wasn't trying to outwalk the noise in my head. People moved around me with purpose, phones to their ears, coffee cups in hand, faces locked in that weekday urgency. I felt like I'd slipped out of their world somehow, like I was watching it all through glass. Near the corner, I passed a tiny coffee shop I'd ignored for years. The owner, an older guy with silver hair, was setting a vase of flowers on a table by the window. Simple, deliberate. I don't know why, but that small act stopped me for a second. It looked peaceful, real. I couldn't remember the last time I did something just because I wanted to, not because it was efficient or expected at the office. Everything looked exactly the same. The harsh fluorescent lights, the tapping of keyboards, the buzz of conversations about projects, deadlines, clients. I sat down, opened my laptop, stared at a spreadsheet, and felt nothing. The numbers were correct, the formulas worked, but none of it mattered. A few years ago, I used to get a rush from solving problems, from doing things right. Now, it all felt mechanical, like watching a movie of myself working during a meeting. Someone asked, "Jake, you good?" I said, "Yeah, just tired." That's what everyone says when they don't have a real answer. I smiled, nodded, went back to pretending I cared. But the truth was, my mind wasn't in that room anymore. It was somewhere far quieter, somewhere that kept asking, "What are you even doing?" By lunch, I couldn't take it anymore. The noise, the fake energy, the endless loop of pretending. So I left. No excuses, no emails. I just walked out. Not angry, not upset. Just done. The rain had started again. Seattle rain isn't heavy, it's steady. A curtain that blurs everything but never really stops. I walked under it 4 blocks, watching people hurry past, watching my reflection ripple on the pavement. The world was still moving, but I'd stopped. And that was the strange part. Nothing fell apart. My life didn't crash, it just paused. That's when I understood something I'd never let myself think before. Sometimes your life doesn't break down, it just stops running. The engine's still humming, but you're not going anywhere. And when the noise fades, you finally hear the one sound you've been drowning out, your own voice. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. It asked, "Jake, what the hell are you doing?" I didn't have an answer. But for the first time in years, I wanted to find one. It started small, like most things that end up changing everything. The next morning, I walked into the office later than usual. No one noticed. That's the thing about corporate life. As long as you look busy, no one cares if you're present. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, stared at the same emails I'd ignored last night. My eyes read the words, but nothing stuck. The noise in my head was louder now, that quiet kind of noise that keeps asking questions you don't want to answer. Around 10, my manager stopped by. He smiled in that polite, mechanical way. "Hey, Jake, you free for a quick sync?" I nodded. We went into a small meeting room, glass walls, fake plants, the usual. He started talking about a client issue, some numbers that didn't align, a presentation that needed fixing. I was supposed to care. Instead, all I could think about was how many times I'd sat in that same room, having the same conversation, using the same words, pretending it all mattered. When he finished, he looked at me, waiting for input. I said, "Yeah, I'll handle it." My voice sounded normal, steady, even confident. But inside, I felt nothing. That scared me more than stress ever had, the complete absence of feeling. At lunch, I went outside. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still heavy. The kind of grey that hangs over Seattle like a ceiling too low to breathe under. I found a bench near the corner cafe, the same one with the guy who arranged flowers yesterday. He was there again, this time wiping down tables, humming to himself. He didn't look like someone with a plan or a purpose. He just looked content. I sat there, watching him, until my phone buzzed. It was a message from my manager. Need the deck by 4. I stared at it for a full minute. Then I turned the phone, face down on the table. That simple act, not answering, felt like rebellion. Like I'd taken one quiet step back from a world that had been swallowing me whole. When I finally stood up, I didn't walk back to the office. I walked the other way. No plan, no excuse, just instinct. I ended up by the waterfront, where the air smelled of salt and engine oil. The ferries were pulling in, seagulls circling above, the usual hum of the city doing what it always did, moving forward. I leaned on the railing and watched the water. It was calm, almost still, but underneath I could see the current shifting, small ripples running fast beneath the surface. It felt like a mirror. From the outside, my life looked steady, but underneath, everything was starting to move. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe 15 minutes, maybe an hour. At some point, my phone rang again, my manager, probably. I didn't answer. Then came another call, my mum. I didn't answer that one either. I just let the sound fade, one ring after another, until there was only silence again. It was in that silence that I realized something had already begun, something I didn't plan, didn't name. I wasn't just taking a break. I was leaving, quietly, without telling anyone, including myself. As I walked home, I passed by a bookstore. The sign in the window said, "You can start over any time." Cheesy, sure, but it stopped me. I stood there, staring at that line until the reflection of my own face appeared behind it. That was the first time I saw myself clearly, not the version that showed up to meetings, not the one that kept up appearances, just me, tired, lost, ready. I didn't go back to the office that day. I didn't send an email. I didn't even feel guilty. I just kept walking until I got home, made another cup of coffee, and sat in the same spot by the window where it all started. Outside, the city moved like nothing had changed. Inside, everything had, and for the first time, I didn't care about what would happen next. I just knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back. The next morning, I woke up later than usual. No alarm, no emails waiting, no reason to rush. I just sat there, listening to the rain tapping against the window. It wasn't peace, not yet. It was emptiness. The quiet kind that sits heavy in your chest, right between two slow breaths. I couldn't tell if I was resting or running away. My phone kept lighting up on the table. Messages from my manager, co-workers, even a couple of missed calls. "Hey Jake, you okay? When are you coming back? We need that report." I read every one of them, then turned the screen face down. I didn't owe anyone an explanation, not when I didn't even have one for myself. The only thing I knew for sure was this: going back wasn't an option. That afternoon, I left the apartment. No laptop, no schedule, no watch. I just walked. The air smelled like wet concrete and cold wind. Down by the lake, joggers passed me in bright running gear, moving fast like they had somewhere to be. I moved slow, really slow. My steps felt heavy but intentional, like I was learning how to exist again, one breath at a time. I stopped by a small cafe, grabbed a cup of coffee, and leaned against the railing near the water. The lake was still, the city's reflection stretched and trembling across the surface. Everything looked blurry, like a memory that hadn't decided if it wanted to fade or stay. Next to me, an older woman was feeding pigeons. She didn't look in a hurry, didn't look distracted. She just existed, calm, whole. I watched her for a while and realized maybe that's what real living looks like. Not constant achievement, not endless motion, just being, just belonging to a single, ordinary moment. I thought about how much of my life had been about proving something to my parents, to my boss, to myself. Always chasing, always earning, always busy. But for what? Most people don't remember the goals you hit. They just remember how you made them feel. And I couldn't even remember the last time I made myself feel okay. When evening came, I went back to my apartment. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. Cluttered desk, shirt on the chair, the faint smell of old coffee. But it didn't feel suffocating anymore. I turned on the light, sat down at my desk, opened my laptop. Not for work this time, just for me. I opened a blank document and typed one line. If today was the beginning, where would I start? The cursor blinked, waiting. I didn't type anything else. I didn't need to. That single question was enough. For the first time, I wasn't making a plan. I was making space. That night, I didn't go to bed early. I just sat by the window, listening to the city cars rolling by. A faint train horn somewhere in the distance, the wind slipping through the cracks. The same sounds that used to drown me now felt almost human. Maybe because, for once, I was listening without trying to escape them. I thought about work, about all the years I spent performing competence, smiling on command, chasing someone else's idea of success. And it hit me, sometimes walking away isn't failure. Sometimes it's the last honest thing you can do. I didn't know what would happen tomorrow. Maybe I'd lose my job. Maybe I'd start from nothing. But for the first time in years, I didn't wake up feeling like I was living someone else's life. And maybe that quiet, unremarkable freedom was enough. The next morning, I woke up to a different kind of silence. Not heavy, not hollow, just still. The kind of quiet that feels clean, like the room itself is finally breathing with you. The light slipping through the blinds was pale and cold, but for the first time, it looked beautiful. My phone lit up again. I didn't even need to check the company, of course. A short, polite email asking me to confirm my current work status. I read it twice, then turned off notifications. The guilt I expected never came. What I felt instead was relief, a strange, weightless kind of freedom, like a rope had finally been cut loose around my neck. I got up and made coffee. No rush, no list of tasks. Just watched the drip fill the cup, one slow stream at a time. I didn't do anything all morning. I just sat there, sipping slowly, letting my thoughts wander. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to stay ahead of deadlines, of expectations, of failure, and how rarely I ever stopped to ask where I was even going. In the afternoon, I went outside. Seattle was still damp and cold, drizzle hanging in the air like a curtain. But this time, it didn't make me feel heavy. I walked down the same streets that used to suffocate me, and somehow they felt different, not happier, just more honest. For the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider in my own city. Passing through the park, I saw people playing basketball, kids laughing, an old couple sitting close together on a bench, and I realized life keeps going, with or without you. You're not the center of anything, and maybe that's not tragic. Maybe that's a kind of peace. That night, my mum called. Her voice was soft, a little worried. "Jake, honey, are you okay? I heard you quit your job." I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "I'm okay, Mum. I just need some time." There was a pause. Then she said, "As long as you're headed in the right direction, it's okay to go slow." After the call, I sat there in the quiet for a long time. I kept thinking about what she said. It's okay to go slow. Maybe that's what I'd been missing all along. I'd spent years chasing speed, control, validation. I'd chosen the fast path, the safe one, the one that looked good from the outside. But now, for the first time, I was choosing something else. I was choosing right. When night fell, I opened the window. The air was cold, but fresh. I could hear the faint hum of the city, cars, wind, a distant siren. It didn't sound like pressure anymore. It sounded like life. I knew things wouldn't be easy from here. I'd have to face the questions. What's next? How will you pay the bills? What are you doing with your life? But for once, those questions didn't scare me. Because even without a plan, I had something I hadn't had in years. Control over my own direction. As the city lights flickered on one by one, I understood something simple. Being lost isn't the end. Sometimes it's the first step to finding the road that's really yours. 3 weeks passed since I left the company. At first, it felt strange, waking up without an alarm. No inbox full of unread messages, no back-to-back meetings waiting to swallow the day. I thought I'd feel empty, anxious, maybe even guilty, but I didn't. What I felt instead was relief, like I'd just stepped out of a room with no air, finally taking the first deep breath after years of holding it in. The first few days, I didn't do much. I slept in, made coffee, opened the window, and just watched the city soaked in morning rain. I let the hours pass without trying to fill them. No deadlines, no structure, just the quiet rhythm of breathing, existing. But as the silence stretched, my mind began to stir. Not the kind of thinking that tries to fix things, the kind that starts to understand them. I thought about the years behind me, the late nights rewriting slides, the early mornings forcing a polite smile. I realized I hadn't been living for a long time. I'd just been running on a schedule, efficient, productive, and hollow. One morning, I went out early. The air was cold, and the city hadn't fully woken up. As I passed the same coffee shop, the silver-haired owner was wiping tables outside. He looked up and smiled. "Back again," he said. "Yeah," I replied. "Not too busy these days." He chuckled, setting a small vase of flowers on the table. "Good," he said. "Sometimes doing nothing is exactly what you need to understand yourself." It was such a simple thing to say, but it stayed with me all day. Maybe because, for the first time, I didn't feel ashamed of slowing down. I didn't feel like I had to justify my pause to anyone, not even to myself. I just let it be. In the days that followed, I started to write. At first it was just fragments, small thoughts, unfinished sentences, pieces of reflection. But slowly they formed into something more coherent. Words began to connect, shaping the chaos inside me into something I could finally look at. Writing didn't fix anything, it just made me feel real again. One night, I posted a short piece online. Nothing fancy, just a few paragraphs about what it feels like to stop running. I wasn't expecting anything, but by morning, there were comments. Thank you. I'm going through this too. I don't feel so alone after reading this. Those words were simple, but they hit hard. For the first time, I realized I wasn't the only one who'd been lost in the noise of stability. Out there, thousands of people were quietly struggling with the same question. Is this all there is? Maybe my small story gave them and me permission to pause. I kept writing after that. Every day, just a little. Not for likes or recognition, but because it made me feel lighter. Each word was like a small exhale, a reminder that I was still moving, still alive, even if slowly. One evening, as the sun was setting, I walked along the lake. The water shimmered with streaks of orange and gold. The air smelled faintly of coffee from a nearby cafe. I stopped, closed my eyes, and smiled. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was running away. I was walking slowly, steadily, in the right direction. I thought about everything I'd been through, the burnout, the silence, the fear, the calm that followed. And I realized being lost doesn't mean you've failed. Sometimes it just means you finally stopped pretending you know the way. That night, back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and wrote the last line of the day's journal. Maybe I haven't found the destination yet, but for the first time in my life, I know I'm on the road. Autumn arrived in Seattle. The air turned crisp, the streets covered in a thin layer of gold and rain. The city still buzzed with noise, the same traffic, the same crowds, the same rush. But it didn't swallow me anymore. I walked through it differently now. I wasn't running from life. I was finally living inside it. I still wrote. Not every day, not obsessively. Only when something inside me needed to speak. One of my readers once commented, "It feels like you're writing my story." I smiled when I read that. Maybe that's what we all are, mirrors for one another. Each of us trying to make sense of our chaos, each of us pretending to have control. A few weeks later, I got an email from a woman who'd been reading my posts. She said she quit her job after reading one of my stories and decided to study again, something she'd always wanted to do. "I'm terrified," she wrote, "but if you could start over, maybe I can too." I read that line twice, and something inside me went still. For years, I'd chased success to inspire respect. Now, I'd somehow inspired someone, not through winning, but through honesty. I never went back to my old job. I didn't look for a new one right away either. Instead, I picked up freelance work, just enough to pay the bills. The rest of my time, I wrote, read, walked, or simply sat by the window watching the rain. I stopped measuring life by speed. I stopped believing it was a race. Life wasn't something to win anymore. It was something to feel. Sometimes, my mum called. She always asked, "Are you doing okay, Jake?" I'd laugh and tell her, "I'm okay, Mum." Not because everything's fine, but because I'm finally living the right way. She'd pause, then smile through the phone. I could hear the relief in her voice. and it made me feel lighter every time. That night, I sat by the window again. Rain streaked down the glass, city lights blurring into gold and grey. I thought about that first morning, the one where I didn't know why I was running. I thought about the silence that followed, and how terrifying it felt to stop. Now, that same silence felt like home. Everything I once feared losing my job, my title, my direction, turned out to be nothing compared to what I gained. The ability to start over, the right to breathe without asking permission. I realized something simple. Freedom isn't about having everything. It's about not needing to pretend anymore. Peace isn't about escaping the storm. It's about not letting the storm decide who you are. I opened my notebook, the same one I'd been filling for months, and wrote one last line. Life doesn't change in a day. It changes the moment you stop running, start breathing, and choose to live. Not perfectly, just honestly. I closed the notebook. Outside, the city shimmered beneath the rain, alive and indifferent. I leaned back, exhaled, and smiled. For the first time, I wasn't chasing a version of myself. I was finally home, not in a place, but in my own skin.